come before you now, just asking for you to prepare our hearts for just this time of worship, for this time of teaching, to just fully bow before you. Lord, this time, this place, everything that you've given us, we want to lift it back to you and offer you the praise you're due. So may your presence just cover this place, and may our hearts just turn to you and receive the teaching that you have, God. We love you so much. It's in your name I pray. Amen. If you guys would, if you're comfortable and you want to, would you stand with us?
Oh my soul, don't give up. There is hope, there is always hope. And there is peace in the storm, in the storm. Don't forget, He is Lord of all. Nations bow, mountains shake at the sound. Just one name over all. Jesus reigns. I know. Nations bow, mountains shake at the sound, just one name over all. Jesus reigns, I know. Strong and mighty, freedom is in His name. Go! Open the gates of heaven, lift up a shout of praise. There is a lion roaring, Jesus the King of glory. There is a King of glory, there is a God who saves, one who is strong and mighty, freedom is in His name. Open the gates of heaven, lift up shout of praise. There is a lion roaring,
Your grace is alive in me. I'm caught in the overflow of mercy that won't let go. Here on this holy ground, standing before you now, Jesus, you are more than enough. If there's one thing I know, it's how you love me so. Jesus, you are more than enough for me. Finally, my eyes can see you've never abandoned me. I'm held by the kindness of a Father who won't give up. And my Father, you'll never give up. Here on this holy ground, standing before you now, Jesus, you are more than enough. If there's one thing I know, it's how you love me so. Jesus, you are more than enough. Forever strong, forever faithful. All my life, you are enough for me. In every storm, in every battle, all my life, you are enough for me. Forever strong, forever faithful. All my life, you are enough for me. In every storm, in every battle, all my life, you are enough for me. Here on this holy ground, standing before you now, and Jesus, you are more than enough. If there's one thing I know, it's how you love me so. And Jesus, you are more. Here on this holy ground, standing before you now, Jesus, you are more than enough. If there's one thing I know, it's how you love me so. Jesus, you are more than enough for me. Fear could never conquer me, 'cause you already have. You already have. Worry could never conquer me, 'cause you already have. You already have. Fear could never conquer me, 'cause you already have. You already have. Worry could never conquer prayer. It's the desire of our heart, is just to believe that these things in this world won't overcome us, God. That you would just be present at the forefront of our minds and our hearts. And may that peace just blanket over us. It's in your name I pray. Amen. You guys can have a seat.
I'm not up here preaching, so don't worry. Evan will be up here shortly. I am here. I am Destry. I'm from Love Inc. I am the Rise Director at Love Inc. Some of you might know me from the store or see me around here or whenever, but I just want to talk to you guys a little bit about Love Inc. this morning and how you kind of are all a part of it without you even knowing it as the church. So I'm going to throw a lot of things at you. I realized in the last service I forgot things because there are so many working parts of Love Inc. It's really hard to even articulate what we do day to day and week to week at Love Inc. So I would just encourage you, if you have more questions, to please talk to me. I'd love to talk to you more. But also just to come down to Love Inc. Love Inc. is on Omaha Street. I will give a tour anytime. You can come chill in my office. I have a super comfy couch. But the big thing that you need to know about Love Inc. is our ultimate goal is to mobilize the church in our community by filling in gaps in our community. So a lot of times, like this slide, I love this slide. It kind of shows, that first picture kind of shows like we as different churches in town, like we can all be doing all our own thing. Sometimes we don't know what to do. Sometimes we are doing the same thing. We don't even realize it. And so the great thing about Love Inc. is it kind of gives us a hub to be able to pray with our churches, to talk to people that are in leadership, and kind of see what is the heartbeat of your church and how can you fill in those gaps in our community. And so a lot of some of the ministries that we do are actually housed at Love Inc., but there's also churches that do things through Love Inc. at your own church. Rimrock downtown, we are hoping in the months to come that you will become part of a gap ministry that we have. God is so cool, and all the different things that happen. We found out that medical supplies are a big deal, of course, to people when they're first getting out of the hospital or whatever. It is very hard. Insurance will give you a walker, but they won't give you a wheelchair. And what are you supposed to do? You can't afford that. And so that's a way that we can fill in that gap. And we're hoping, if insurance can be nice to us, we can have some more green lights with that and just be in prayer of how Rimrock can get involved with that gap ministry. So I'm going to walk you through. I'm used to giving tours, mostly with teenagers. So you guys are not a bunch of teenagers, but that's been my whole summer has been filled with teenagers. So I'm really excited to talk to you guys today so you can kind of understand Love Inc. a little bit more. So I'm going to walk you through. So when people come into Love Inc., sometimes they're as volunteers. Sometimes they're coming to look at our stores that we have. We have 2 stores. Mine is a furniture store. But sometimes they come in because they're in crisis and they need somebody to listen to their story and be part of their story. And so what happens is when people come to into our doors, or they give us a call, we'll get them hooked up with the Connection Center. The Connection Center is where we can kind of see where they're at, what they're needing in that time. Sometimes it's not us. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's a church in town. Sometimes it's another organization. But we're able to, it's called an intake that we do with the participants. And with our participants, is what we call them, because they participate with us, which is just the coolest thing. And why I love Love Inc. so much is because they come into our doors and we get to live life with them for a little bit. We get to build some relationships with them. We get to just show them in just a real, tangible way the love of Jesus. And Sometimes that's through furniture. They come in and they need to earn some furniture. And so we'll have people that need to earn furniture. Maybe they're getting out of homelessness. Maybe they're just getting a new place and they have a big family. And they come and stand with me for like 6 hours in a 2-week frame. And then they're able to get like 5 pieces of furniture or more for their place. And with them like coming to work with us and just do a little bit of sanding, we get to sit side by side with them. And they get to kind of get that dignity back that is sometimes lost in that process because they get to be a part of it. And I think it's really cool because they also know that they can come back at any time to Love Inc., even if it's not for furniture. And so I just really love that. And then people can also come in and get kitchen items or linen items at Love Inc., and those are completely ran by 2 different churches. We just kind of house them, and so that's really cool to see these ladies they're crazy amazing because we have mounds and mounds of donations because our community is so cool that we get to go through every week and get to bless other people in our community. We also have classes that a lot of churches in town house for us. We supply them with teachers and all the curriculum and everything like that, but all they get to do is say yes. And they get to house these different classes. Classes range from like parenting or financial things. And then once people graduate from these classes, they're able to earn furniture, clothing for their kids, and then they just get to come back, get some wisdom about just everyday things that they need. We also have an after-school program, which is just growing like crazy. So like Westminster on the west side of town, they house our newest after-school program, and that thing has just blown up. And it's for kids to come to after school and just kind of have a safe place to be. And then Bethel has held one for a really long time, and it's really cool, like the amount of kids that just have fallen in love with Jesus because of that program and those relationships that they have made. I've had the privilege of being in some of those. My son worked out a couple of them for a while, and our teens are my heart. And so I just have been really cool to see the after-school program. So there's many different things going on with Love Inc. And then we also just have 2 stores. So I, every week, get to rearrange a very large living room, which is the funnest job ever, and design furniture. You get to see some of my awesome volunteers. We are almost completely volunteer ran. It's a very hard concept for some people to understand. There's 12 staff. We're understaffed right now, but when we're at full capacity, we have 12 staff who cover all of the Black Hills, and that includes Sturgis, and that includes Hill City, and then we're trying to expand it into like Spearfish and a couple different areas. So volunteers are just the heartbeat. Like we cannot do anything. I get to like hang out with 12 to 15 volunteers every week in my workshop, and we get to redo furniture. And so we're always looking for volunteers to help with anything. We need people to deliver and pick up furniture. I know that there's a young adult group here. I'm just putting it out there. You guys have better backs than me, and so we will always take people to do that. And that's when we're doing deliveries, that's delivering to people that earn that furniture, and then pickups is picking up donations that we have. Thrive is our other store. It's a venture store, and within that we have a bike program where participants can come in and within like an hour or 2 learn how to fix up a bike, and then take that bike with them, and like out of nowhere just have transportation. And if you spend 5 minutes with some of these people that get these bikes, what a big deal that is, because finally they have a job that they can get to, and like that's big. And then they also know how to fix their bike, and they can help their friends. And we have teenagers that come in and that are doing community service or just need a place to be, and they get to learn a lot of different things. We have kids that have come in, spent years with us, and now how to like build an e-bike. Like that's super cool. I'm terrified of e-bikes, but for those kids, that's really cool. So I think the big thing to know about Love Inc. is that it's it's a way for us to mobilize the church within this community, and what a great big impact that we can have in people's lives, and just share Jesus to a lot of different people, and to kind of just have that mindset of like, where are the gaps that we're missing? And I think when you're able to focus and just be in prayer about it, there's amazing things that can, like things that you don't usually think about, like medical supplies. You don't think of that day to day unless you're in that crisis. And what a big deal that is for us to be able to help people with that. So that was a lot of information. And but I really encourage you to come to Love Inc. I would really love to give a tour to anybody that would like to do that. And we're online. You can call us anytime and all that stuff. But I think hopefully, you have known a little bit about Love Inc. and hopefully you learn a little bit more. And I know that it's going to be really great working side by side with Rimrock. And we look forward to things to come. So I just thank you so much for letting me babble for a little bit. So.
Round of applause, please. Love Inc. is an amazing industry, amazing organization that helps people do what she's describing. So if that's at all on your heart, I encourage you to continue to follow the Spirit if He's leading you and just check it out. You guys ready to study the Bible? Yes, I hope. All right. So as we need to always do, let's go before the God who wrote it before we get into His Word. And God, we stop like we do each week in order to recognize your reality, to say you are real. Say it again, God, you are real. That's why we are here. We believe in you firmly. We want to know more about who you are. We give you access to our minds right now. Speak truth, whatever that is. Amen. All right, so we're in a series called The Faith of the Patriarchs, and currently we're looking at a man named Jacob and his stories. Right? And as we walk through these stories, like we need to do with any sort of Bible study, we're looking to learn lessons, right? See the lessons that he learned, so that way we can learn lessons ourselves. And this is the first time that I've gotten to spend any time really teaching through the life of Jacob. And something that's really rose to the front of my mind is that Jacob was definitely a real man. So often with the other men of the Bible, men like Abraham, Moses, and David, it's really easy for me to elevate them to a status that's far above normal. But with Jacob, it's so much easier for me to see him in a similar light that I see myself. He was a broken man that God still chose to use and include in his plans. In our first week, we saw beyond a shadow of a doubt that our relationship with God and his ability to grab a hold of our mess of a life and pull us out of the things that we have screwed up, right, and then redirect us towards what is good, that has absolutely nothing to do with our behavior. While Jacob was on the run after diabolically stealing everything of value from his older brother, God stepped in and promised him life. Because in that moment, Jacob chose to trust in God, and in his words of promise, he was able to begin to walk down an entirely different road, one that would lead him towards the amazing things that God wanted to bring to him. In our second week of study of Jacob, we saw that just because Jacob had cried out to God and had been saved from his own wretchedness, it did not mean that his life would be smooth sailing from there on out. God allowed Jacob to be deceived by his father-in-law and tricked into marrying two of his daughters, right? Rachel, the one whom he loved, and Leah, the one whom he didn't. For 14 years, he had to pay off the debt that he incurred by marrying those two daughters in servitude to the man who had deceived him. And God allowed him to go through this so that way Jacob could be refined or changed or transformed through the trials. God allows us to suffer so that he can continually, slowly, yes, but continually remake us into who we were created to be. Let me give you a potentially memorable tagline from what we've already learned. We are saved by grace alone and then remade through our struggles. This morning, as we continue to find lessons from Jacob for our own lives, we're going to see that our relationship with God, in order for us to truly embrace what he wants to bring us, we need to treat it like we would any other relationship we have with someone that we love and we depend upon, by committing more of our time and our energy to him, to God. Just like with your friends or your family, right? That could be your spouse, your kids, your parents, whomever. When you do this, when you're willing to give them more of your time and your energy, what happens? You get to know them more, which then allows you to grow closer together, which then allows you to pour more goodness into each other's lives, which is what we really all want and need, is people to bring more and more good things to us. Now, as I'm saying this, I'm guessing you're agreeing with me. It's a fairly simple and logical formula to create healthy relationships. Time plus energy equals strong relationships. But one of the sadder truths in our world is that it seems that very, very, very few Christians apply this logic to their relationship with their God. Whether we consciously know it or not, we live as if our relationship with our Creator is different than our relationship we have with others. Even though we know it, even though we put our faith in the fact that he is real and that we need him, we so often only commit an hour a week to him. And the energy that we give is just singing songs along with others and listening somewhat to a sermon as it's given to you. Do you understand what I'm explaining logically? Right? Is going to church important? Absolutely. Is it a way to get to know God more and allow him to work more in your lives? Yes, without a doubt. But should that be all that we do when it comes to developing our relationship with the one who made us, saved us, and is sustaining us day after day? No. Now that I've hopefully got your attention and your mind rolling, let's look at how Jacob's recorded stories fully affirm this truth. The main text that we're going to be studying is when Jacob wrestles with God. I'm guessing you guys have heard that title before. It's in Genesis 32. So what I want to do is first read it to you before I get into any of my thoughts on it. Genesis 32, verses 22 and on. If you got a Bible, obviously, like I always say, open that up, but we do have it behind me as well. The same night, he, Jacob, got up and took his 2 wives, his 2 maids, and his 11 children, and crossed the ford of Jabbok. He took them and sent them across the stream, and likewise everything that he had. Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. When the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he struck him on the hip socket, and Jacob's hip was put out of joint as he wrestled with him. Then he said, "Let me go, for the day is breaking." But Jacob said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." So he said to him, "What is your name?" And he said, "Jacob." Then the man said, "You shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and humans and have prevailed." Then Jacob answered him, "Please tell me your name." But he said, Why is it that you ask my name?" And there he blessed him. So Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, "For I have seen God face to face, and yet my life is preserved." The sun rose upon him as he passed Penuel, limping because of his hip. Therefore, to this day, the Israelites do not eat the thigh muscle that is on the hip socket, because he struck Jacob on the hip socket at the thigh muscle. Now, my first reaction when I read this last Sunday afternoon was, oh no, I have to teach on this? This is a crazy story that gives such little detail of what is actually happening. Right? Jacob is physically wrestling all night with someone who has the power to change his name and put a blessing upon him that he desperately wants. And we also see that Jacob is unwilling to let go of this person. And even though he has the power to bless him and to change his name, he can't get away from him. Right? What is happening here? Right? It's such a hard passage to begin to make sense of. But because of you, right, and my position in front of you, I was forced to really dig deep and try to figure this out so that way I could tell you some things this morning. Right? And as the teacher, Bible teacher, what I always want you to know, if nothing else, is if you want to learn anything about a passage in the Bible, what must you always start with? Anybody know? The context. I haven't said this to you guys in a while. It seems like I need to say it one more time. If you're going to learn anything about a passage in the Bible, you must always start with what? The context. Right? If you don't know what context is, spend a moment to Google that. Right? I'm not going to get into that. Right? So when this came to my mind, right, I got to know the context. I began to flip backwards in my Bible to see why this story was even here. So let me give you a quick summary of what Jacob went through before he wrestled with God. Now, after he had finished serving Laban, that's his father-in-law, right, for 14 years, God calls Jacob and his huge family to return to his homeland, what we know as the Promised Land. We see this in Genesis 31, verse 3. Then the Lord said to Jacob, "Return to the land of your ancestors and to your kindred, and I will be with you." In the next verse, Jacob obeys. He packs up his wives, kids, servants, and all of their possessions, and he starts heading east. Now, this can simply be seen as a passing verse, telling only about Jacob's choice. But by thinking a little bit beneath the obvious, Jacob's decision shows us that he was in a place where he trusted God. For him to be willing to pack up everything and to leave a place that was familiar, one through which he had been profiting quite measurably, it had to require a deeper motivation. Now, from the concepts that we looked at last week, that God transforms us through trials, I think it's safe to believe that during the past 15 years or so of hard living, Jacob's relationship with God had grown significantly. And that is why he's in a place where he'd be willing to leave behind what he knew. Now, in chapter 32, right, as we continue, we get a little insight into what is on Jacob's mind as he heads home. And this, it confirms why it confirms that he was choosing to trust God by doing this. So chapter 32, verses 3 through 5. Jacob sent before him to his brother Esau. You guys remember that character? To his brother Esau in the land of Seir, the country of Edom, instructing them, "Thus you shall say to my lord Esau, says your servant Jacob, I have lived with Laban as an alien and stayed until now. And I have oxen and donkeys and flocks, males and female slaves, and I have sent to tell you, my lord, in order that I may find favor in your sight." You guys remember what happened 15 years prior when Jacob left his homeland? He was running from his older and stronger brother that wanted him dead. Now that God is calling him to return home, this has to be the first thing on his mind, and rightfully so. Imagine how you would be feeling returning to a place where you had burned every last bridge, right? And you ran away because you needed to save your life. Every one of us would be worried about what lay ahead. And in verses 6 through 8, Jacob's worst fears are becoming a reality. The messengers, the one that he had sent, returned to Jacob saying, "We came to your brother Esau, and he is coming to meet you, and 400 men are with him." Oh, that's an army. So what's Jacob do? Then Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed, and he divided the people that were with him, and the flocks and the herds and camels into two companies, thinking, "If Esau comes to the one company and destroys it, then the company that is left will escape." Jacob makes a little bit of his own plans here, but honestly, he's in a place where he only has two choices. Based on the gravity of his situation, what he's in, and everything that may be charging full force at him, Jacob only has two options. He can either turn inward, right, and turn to those around him and say, "All right, what do we do? How are we going to figure this out?" Or he can fall on his knees, look upward, and say, "God, I need you." And with the verses that follow, we see that when Jacob's in this serious hardship, he goes directly to God, which once again shows us that Jacob must have a very real relationship with God. Check out this prayer, verse 9. And Jacob said, "O God of my father Abraham and God of my father Isaac, O Lord, you said to me, 'Return to your country and to your kindred, and I will do you good.' I am not worthy of the least of all the steadfast love and all the faithfulness that you've shown to your servant. For with only my staff I crossed this Jordan, and now I have become two companies. Deliver me, please, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I am afraid of him. He may come and kill us all, the mothers with their children. Yet you have said, I will surely do you good and make your offspring as the sands of the sea, which cannot be counted because of their number." Man, I love this prayer. A man in a serious, desperate spot. And you see how he prays? He first starts with humility and gratitude. Let's look at verse 10 again. "I am not worthy of the least of all of your steadfast love and all of the faithfulness that you've shown your servant. For with only my staff I crossed this Jordan, and now I've become two companies." This is beautiful. He brings his mind back to what God has already done for him. But then he presents a plea, and he does so not off of his own logic and emotions, but even more so off of the promise that God had made to him. Verse 11, deliver me, please, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau. Right? So that's his plea. But then he comes back to his rationale behind it. Verse 12, yet you have said, I will surely do you good and make your offspring as the sand of the sea, which cannot be counted. Now, before we move into the passage this morning that we're looking at of Jacob wrestling with God, I first want to point out the truth that I've been trying to show you. Based on what we are seeing by looking at Jacob and his reactions, we are seeing that he is trusting God and he has a relationship with him. Is that fair to assume? Are you guys seeing that? Based on the last few chapters, the ones that show him being tricked by Laban and then having to deal with the fallout of 2 jealous wives, the fact that Jacob is closer to God shows us that God can and will do what Paul says he will do. Work all things out for good for those who trust him. When a person chooses to continually turn to God when things are hard, they will build a solid relationship with the only one that can bring lasting peace and joy. This is the context of the passage we're looking at this morning. Jacob's relationship with God has been getting stronger and stronger. Because of that, God is now leading him into the scary unknown. Because Jacob was willing to trust God and follow him, he is now on the precipice of the hardest thing he has ever faced, right? The consequences of his past foolish behavior. This is an interesting cause and effect, isn't it? The more that he trusted God, the more that God led him into the unknown. Now, Jacob isn't the only one that this has happened to. Right? When you look at the biblical figures throughout the Bible, it seems to happen to every single one. What I hope to show you this morning is that one of the reasons I believe that God does this, right, calls us into something that's hard, scary, unknown, is because it forces us to push more into God and our reliance on him. When we do this, it allows us to go deeper in our relationship with him, which is the best thing possible for our lives. So this means that if you have been following God as long as Jacob has, 15 years, that's a long time. But maybe for you it's been 30, 50. Right? It doesn't matter how long you've known God, he is always wanting to take you deeper and bring you closer to him. Let's look at how he did this with Jacob. So back in our passage of Jacob wrestling with God, 32 verse 22, if you need the reminder, we see that Jacob deliberately creates space for himself and God. The same night, Jacob got up and took his 2 wives, his 2 maids, and his 11 children and crossed the ford of Jabbok. He took them and sent them across the stream and likewise everything that he had. Jacob was left alone. So it seems as if he said, all right, I need to remove these distractions so that way I can get alone with God. And my thought behind why he did this was because God didn't answer him in the prayer that he prayed earlier. He's like, man, I cried out to God. I didn't get the answer I want, so therefore I need to make room for God. And in verse 24, you know what we see? God meets him there. Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. Now, I know there's a lot of intelligent people here that are deeper thinkers, so you might be wondering why I so confidently said that God met him here. Did it say that in the text? No, it said a man. But because I was forced to study deeper, let me show you 3 different biblical proofs that I found that shows for me that this was God. Now, the first 2 come in some verses that follow here. So after Jacob finishes the all-night struggle, he is blessed by this person. In order for a person to be blessed in that culture, that person that poured the blessing upon them, they had to be greater than that person. Also in verse 30, Jacob names this place Peniel because he just saw God face to face. So Jacob himself believed that this was God. So I think that's pretty strong evidence. The second piece of supporting evidence is found in Hosea. Now, I'm sorry I don't have any catchy phrases to help you remember the minor prophets. You just keep flipping through until you just happen to stumble upon it. That didn't take me as long as I was afraid it would. All right. So Hosea 12, verses 3 and 4. In the womb, he, Jacob, tried to supplant his brother, and in his manhood he strove with God. He strove with the angel. See that? It's different. And prevailed. He wept and sought his favor. He met him at Bethel, and there he spoke with him. Almost every other time that we see the phrase the angel mentioned in the Old Testament is either the angel or the angel of the Lord. Most commentators believe that this was Jesus. The last piece of supporting evidence for me, of Jacob wrestling with not just a man but God, comes from what we see clearly shown in the Gospels. I love a simple sentence in John 1, verse 14. And the Word, Jesus, became flesh and lived among us, and we have seen his glory, and the glory as of a Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. He became flesh, and he lived among us. Because Jesus became a man and lived among us, this shows us in undeniable ways that our God can and wants to interact directly with his creation. So for me, with those different pieces of evidence, all this has brought me to the point where I believe that when Jacob was unsatisfied with God's response to him crying out, he then made deliberate choice to pull away from all of his distractions so that way he could intentionally seek God. And when he did this, God showed up. Right there, that phrase, that should stop us and say, whoa. God, the creator of everything, showed up and stepped into this man's life when he sought him. Now, please try to shake the Christianese. Yeah, God showed up. And think about the reality of that happening. The creator of everything entering into a broken man's life to bring him hope. Now, for me, what I'm seeing in this that can so clearly apply to us is that when we need more of God and are willing to intentionally carve out time and space for him, then he will meet us in that place. Here's another verse. Sadly, I didn't hand these out. There's 150 of them that are going to be sitting on the back. If you want one, it says, "You seek me and find me. You seek me with all of your heart. You will be found by me, declares the Lord." Jeremiah 29. Right? Grab one. Put it on your dashboard, your mirror, somewhere where you can know what God can and will do. Now, this is an amazing offer, but as we continue to read about Jacob and his time with God, it doesn't mean that it will always go the way that we want. And we see this with Jacob. Check out verse 24. Let me get back there. Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. Let me put it in the way that I think we should read it. Jacob was left there alone, and Jesus wrestled with him until daybreak. Right, anybody here a wrestler? There's got to be at least one. Come on, right? Think about what this sport entails. Two men throw on spandex and head coverings and then do everything they can to hold the other one down for 3 seconds. It's one of the most intense sports we have. It requires the closest contact and also every ounce of a person's physical and mental strength. And this is what Jacob did with God. Now, when you think about spending a night pulled away to be with God, is this what comes to your mind? A wrestling match? Right, for most of us, we're probably assuming, or at least hoping, that when we pull alone with God, thinking metaphorically, it'll be like a nice, pleasant walk at sunset. Right? Or two friends sharing a cup of coffee or wine as they talk about the deeper things. But for Jacob, he has to fight with everything he has until the break of dawn. Because of this, right, it's really important for us to remember that this is whose experience with God? Jacob's. What we're seeing here is not a universal truth, like for God so loved the world. This passage is showing what Jacob had to experience with God in order for him to be brought into a much deeper relationship with him. Now, I'm not saying that this doesn't apply to you. Maybe it does. Maybe this is what you need. But at the same time, maybe it doesn't. But what we are seeing, right, is that our God, he is a God that creates custom-fit interactions with us. That he comes to each of us in the ways that we need so that way we can experience whatever has to happen for us to go deeper with him. And how amazing of truth is that? Right? The creator of everything isn't like a clockmaker that put everything in place and backed away. No, he's interactive. He's personal. He wants to get down on our level to do what needs to be done for our lives. Now, as we continue to read, we can see a few different lines that help us better understand what Jacob had to go through. In verse 25, it states that when the man, Jesus, saw that he did not prevail against Jesus. Now, could Jesus have physically prevailed against Jacob? Right? In a wrestling match, could the Son of God have held down Jacob for 3 seconds? Of course. So what is being described here must be more than just a physical match. For me, at this point, I believe that this maybe was a physical wrestling match, but I think a lot more had to have been happening. Right? It's also a metaphor for what was going on in Jacob's heart. Remember the context of this passage? Jacob is scared out of his mind that his brother Esau is going to annihilate him. So he turns to God for help. But Jacob isn't satisfied with God's response or lack thereof, right? Which means what? Jacob doesn't fully trust God in this moment. If he did, then after he cried out to God, he would have confidently marched forward towards his brother, doing what God had told him to do, because he would know that God would be faithful, right? He would trust that God would hold true to his promise. But Jacob didn't. This means that Jacob must have been worried, right? His worry must have overcome his trust in God to stay true. Now, out of that hesitation or fear, he then makes tangible steps to draw nearer to God, which God directly responds to. But as we're seeing, after a night of physically, mentally, and spiritually battling with God, Jacob is still not in a spot where he fully trusts God. Right? That's why it says that Jesus, that the man, was unable to prevail. Now, I believe, that's why it states that. So let me give you a quick explanation of a biblical premise that I'm proposing here. Out of his love for us, God gave us free will. He gave us the ability to choose whether or not we would trust him, and this is something that he will never force upon anyone. Right? Even though Jacob was face to face with God, even then he was unwilling to fully put his trust in God. Now, I know it's easy for us to judge Jacob for this. Like, come on, Jacob, are you kidding me? You got to experience that, but yet you still didn't fully trust him? But the reason why he is doing this is the same reason we don't trust God day after day. It's because of our desire to be self-reliant. Deep within every person is a passionate desire to only depend upon ourselves, on our logic and our emotion, or that of the people that are around us, right? Their thoughts, their emotions. Now, it doesn't matter who you are or how long you've known God. This is a battle that we are continually fighting day after day. And I really like the way that Paul describes it in Galatians. Galatians 5. If you haven't read this, memorized it, man, this is such a key piece for me to understand my life. Galatians 5:16. Live by the Spirit. See that choice? I say, and do not gratify the desires of the flesh. That's our heart, what's in us. For what the flesh desires is opposed to the Spirit, and what the Spirit desires is opposed to the flesh. For these are opposed to each other to prevent you from doing what you want. But because of who God is, even though we're in the midst of this battle continually, right, and because of his love for us, he still wants to give us exactly what we need in order to be able to win that battle and to walk out the other side fully dependent on him. I believe this is why we see God take it one step further with his wrestling match with Jacob. Verse 25. When the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he struck him on the hip socket, and Jacob's hip was put out of joint as he wrestled with him. Now, I don't know if breaking Jacob's hip was the only thing that God did, or if this is also a metaphor for something that he did within Jacob's heart. But either way, in that moment, God shows his power over Jacob, that he has the ability to fully disable him at will. Now, because of the lack of the text, this is only my interpretation, but because of what I see happen in the next verse, I think that when God does this, when he shows his power to Jacob, Jacob is finally in a spot where he's able to more fully trust in God. Verse 26. Then the man said, "Let me go, for the day is breaking." But Jacob said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." Because Jacob is unwilling to let go of God without his blessing, I feel like this is showing us that Jacob is now in a spot where he is much more fully dependent on God. Instead of hanging on to his own logic and the plans that I'm sure he had created to overcome his brother, he is now in a spot where he surrenders his own will and he will not leave until God has given him his blessing. until God's hand is upon him. Now, out of this interpretation, I've come to believe that this passage is a time in which Jacob's relationship with his creator and savior, it went to an entirely different level. During that night, God allowed Jacob to experience what he needed to experience so that way he would have a life-changing dependence on him that would stick with him for all the days that follow. Now, something that's helped me become confident in this is the way that this all ends. Verse 27 and 28. So he, God, said to him, "What is your name?" And he said, "Jacob." Then the man said, "You shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with humans and have prevailed." Now, back in Jacob's day, a name was a really big deal. You know, so much of it spoke of a person's identity. Jacob, which means supplants or takes a hold of, or metaphorically, he deceives. Imagine having that name. Right? He was named this prophetically because of the ways that he would continually live. He was always trying to make a name for himself by taking what wasn't supposed to be his. Through his first 40 years, he was always trying to gain the approval of his parents at any cost. But here, after you willingly set apart time for God to desperately seek God's face, God then renames him Israel, right? Which, according to my text, the subnote down below says it means to strive with God, which is such a cool name. I would love to have that as one who strives with God. But it also means Prince of God. In this moment, God is changing Jacob's identity from a deceiver to royalty, one who has chosen to lead his people. Now, this is a monumental change. Right? An indelible moment that there's no way Jacob would have ever forgotten about it. Right? One in which his trajectory in life was forever changed. Now, I'm out of time, and if I had more, I would show you other examples of how this happens in the Bible, right? To men like Elijah, right? Continually having to go before God, or Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, right? Just pouring himself out. I would also tell you about a time in my life where I truly committed time to God and my life was forever changed. Right? But what I want to leave you with is some questions to try to get you thinking about how this could and should apply to your life. No matter where you are with your relationship with God, he wants to take you deeper. He wants you to know him more fully so that way you will trust him more, so that way he can do more in you and through you. Right? This is concrete, absolute. There's no way you can get around that truth. And just like with any relationship we have with the people that we love, to those that are important to us, if we want to grow in our understanding of who God is and our dependency on him, we have to be willing to do what it says in Jeremiah 29. We have to seek him with all of our hearts. And the most practical way to do this is what we saw Jacob do. To regularly set apart time with God. If Jacob hadn't been willing to do this, I wonder if he would have been able to experience what he did. But because he chose to give his night to God, his life was forever changed. I want to leave you, I want you to leave here thinking, even being challenged with a question. How could I give God more of my time and my energy? Please walk out of these doors seeing your relationship with God in the same way that you see the relationship you have with other important people, right? Your spouse, your kids, your friends, whomever, right? And with that in mind, ask yourself the question, what can I do every day to make knowing him and his ways more of my priority? We don't have to be like Jacob and wait for the hardest moments of our life to be forced into this position with God. Right? We can seek him now. And according to Jeremiah, when we do, what will happen? We will find him. You know, I want to leave you with one other section of verses. This is one of my favorite metaphors. It's in the book of Ezekiel. Yeah, Ezekiel 47. And as the musicians come up, they're going to lead us in some powerful verses, or powerful songs that can really get your mind rolling. But I just want to show you this metaphor. And just think of your life with this, your relationship with God. Ezekiel 47. Then he brought me back to the entrance of the temple. That's where God is. There, water was flowing from below the threshold of the temple towards the east, for the temple faced east. And the water is life. It's like the source of life, was flowing down from below the south end of the threshold of the temple, south of the altar. Then he brought me out by way of the north gate and led me around on the outside to the outer gate that faces towards the east. And the water, again, coming from the throne of God, was coming out of the south side. Going on eastward with a cord in his hand, the man measured 1,000 cubits, 18 inches. And then he led me through the water, and it was ankle deep. Right? This is life. This is like the source of all that is good. It was ankle deep. Again, he measured 1,000, and he led me through the water, and it was knee deep. Again, he measured 1,000 and led me through the water, and it was up to my waist. Right? Think about the distance you have to go, the time you have to spend in order to get deeper into the water. Again, he measured 1,000, and it was a river that I could not cross, for the water had risen. It was deep enough to swim in, a river that could not be crossed. He said to me, "Mortal, have you seen this?"
Something isn't adding up. This wild exchange you offer us. I gave my worst, you gave your blood. Seems hard to believe. You're telling me you chose the cross. You're telling me I'm worth that much. If that's the measure of your love, how else would I sing? But completely, deeply, sold out, sincerely abandoned. I'm completely, freely, hands to the ceiling, and never Consider it yours, Lord. Consider it yours, Lord. All the failures I had, the victories I don't, the battles I fight, each crown that I hoard. Consider it yours, Lord. Consider it yours, Lord. All the glory forever, the grave that you won, the praise of the heavens, the kingdom to come. Consider it yours, Lord. Consider it yours. I'm completely, deeply sold out, sincerely abandoned. I'm completely, freely, hands to the ceiling, enamored. My one life endeavor to match your surrender, to mirror not my will but yours. I'm completely, deeply, so care who sees me abandoned. Whoa, I surrender all. I surrender all. I surrender all. You'll never leave me abandoned. I surrender all.
The Lord is my shepherd, and He is everything I need. So I will not worry, I will not fear the enemy. He said that He loves me, He said that He's with me even through. I walk through the valley of shadow and death, and still I know He has good plans. He has good plans for me. So I will take heart in deserts and gardens. He has good plans. He has good plans for me. If I know my Father, I know my Father has good plans. So I will take heart in this is in God. He has good plans. He has good plans for me. If I know my Father, I know my Father has. He has good plans. He has good plans for me. So I will take heart and this is in God. He has good plans. He has good plans for me. If I know my Father, I know my Father. Good plans, good plans, good plans. If I know my Father, I know my Father has good plans, good plans, good plans. If I know my Father, I know my Father has good plans. All I see is the battle. You see my victory. When all I see is the mountain, you see mountain move. And as I walk through the shadow, your love surrounds me. There's nothing to fear now, for I'm safe with you. So when I fight, I'll fight on my knees with my hands lifted high. Oh God, the battle belongs to you, and every fear I lay at your feet. I'll sing through the night. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. And if you are for me, who can be against me?
Nothing can stand against the power of our God. You shine in the shadows. You win every battle. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. So when I fight, I'll fight on my knees with my hands lifted high. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. And every fear I lay at your feet. I'll sing through the night. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. Oh God, the battle belongs to you.
God be praised. You guys be blessed, and we'll see you next week.